Something terrible happened to my clients when I switched pigments in 2018. Now, 4 to 5 years later, they're all coming back gray and solid. So why did this happen? And will it happen for all microblading? And what did I do about this? I'm gonna answer all those questions and more in this video. Side note, please excuse my eye. I woke up with an eye infection this morning, so it's a little swollen. We'll just ignore it. So I've been microblading since 2016, or for the last 7 years, and I've used multiple different pigment lines over the years. I was trained in 2018 by a very popular brand, and I started using their pigments. What I didn't know at the time is that you should be really cautious using new pigments. What might look good immediately healed can turn into a nightmare down the road. And this is exactly what happened to me. When I'd see my initial healed results, everything looked great. They'd be crisp, clean, thin lines, but now I'm getting these clients back 4 to 5 years later and all their strokes have turned gray and solid. I can't even touch them up because it'll only make it look worse. Frustrated and discouraged about microblading, I started to seek out answers. I did consider that it could be my depth, but I was trained to use very light pressure in one of my trainings, and I was not seeing a whole lot of bleeding. It was very minimal. And if it was depth, shouldn't I have had some clients come back fine and other clients come back blown out? I'm thinking that surely all of my clients couldn't have been too deep. So I listened to podcasts, I read books, and I researched, and this is what I'm thinking has happened. Carbon black happened. Understanding carbon black. So carbon black, it's known for its deep, dark color, makes it a go-to option for those in permanent makeup who are seeking a more pronounced and defined appearance. However, the characteristics that make carbon black appealing also contribute to its drawbacks in the context of microblading. Carbon black, it's an inorganic pigment, but it behaves like an organic. If you do want to understand the differences between organic and inorganic, I go into much more detail in another video. Carbon black, it's also the smallest pigment and it's very, very stable, meaning it's very permanent. So with its small molecule size and high level of permanence, here is what I've discovered. Here are the 4 disadvantages of using carbon black in microblading. Number 1, its migratory tendency. One significant concern with carbon black pigment is its propensity to migrate in the skin. Carbon black, it's the smallest molecule. And every single one of my clients, since using carbon black, they've all migrated. This migration, it can lead to the diffusion of pigments beyond the intended area, resulting in blurred or smudged lines. For microblading, where we really need precision in order to mimic the natural hair strokes, this is going to compromise the clarity and the sharpness of the strokes. In my experience, after 3 to 4 years, the strokes get this gray blur between the strokes, and this causes the brow to become more of a solid gray, bad powder brow. This makes touch-ups absolutely impossible because the new strokes are just gonna sit on top of the gray backdrop. It's gonna lack the color in between for the skin and not look like hair strokes. Number 2, its top layer appearance. Over time, carbon black pigment, it tends to rise to the top layers of the skin. When the pigment goes into the skin, it's brown, but the red, black, and yellow are all the colors that are combined to make this brown. Over time, the colors are going to begin to separate from each other, and depending on their molecular weight, this is going to determine which colors are going to rise to the top and which colors are going to sink to the bottom. So this separation of the underlying pigments can cause the eyebrows to adopt its gray tone. This effect is often unintended and undesirable because it significantly alters the original color and the appearance of the microbladed eyebrows. Number 3, it's really permanent. When microblading first came out, it was marketed as a semi-permanent procedure, which is super misleading. The pigment does not ever really fade completely from the skin, and this is especially true when the pigment contains carbon black. It's the most stable pigment color, and it's not removed from the body very easily. We actually do want our microblading strokes to fade more quickly, as this indicates that the body is cleaning up and removing the pigment from the skin. Our bodies, they recognize iron oxides as foreign bodies, whereas with the organics and carbon black, the body recognizes it as something more familiar, so your immune system doesn't attack it or clear up the pigment as much. Number 4, it's more difficult to remove. So this is what I've heard from removal techs, so take this with a grain of salt. I have no science to back this up. This is just what I've heard. If your clients ever want to remove their brows one day, carbon black is going to be especially tricky to remove. Iron oxides and inorganics, they're easier to remove from the skin using a multitude of different methods. So what I use now. When I first started, In microblading 7 years ago, we were using inorganic pigments. From what I noticed though, a lot of artists, they were seeking a longer lasting pigment and they didn't want one that was going to fade to a salmon or a red, which is what the iron oxides were doing at the time. So many artists around 2017, 2018, they switched to organic leaning pigments, which many of them contain carbon black. Now, it's only after 5 years that we're seeing the negative consequences of using the carbon black in microblading specifically. I posted a reel on my Instagram about carbon black and why it turns gray, and I got so many comments with people saying that this happened to them. It's so common. I don't know why more of us aren't talking about this or sharing our experiences. Please drop a comment in the comments below if you've noticed this with your microblading. So with my experience in inorganics, when I get my clients back after 2 to 3 years, their strokes, they're more of a lighter reddish brown. Now, I don't use those same pigments as I did before because I'm now seeking something that doesn't turn to a reddish. So I heard about the Monica Avani pigment line. From what I understand, these pigments, which came out about 4 years ago, they're now showing aged microblading strokes as just lighter versions of the initial color rather than transitioning to a salmon or a red. So I'm using Monica Avani now for my target browns, and then I'm using LI Pigments modifiers called Gray Vanish and Ungray. Some things to look out for when microblading with iron oxide pigments. Number 1, your healed results will not be as consistent as working with organics. When I was doing organic leaning pigments, I could get almost perfect healed results after just 1 treatment. Now that I'm using the inorganics though, I'm getting maybe about like a 60 to an 80% retention after the first treatment, which I'm happily taking that as a trade-off in order to give my clients better long-lasting results. So the molecule size is larger with iron oxides, and it makes that more difficult to get pigment to stay in the skin. So expect a 50 to 80% retention after the first treatment, or less if you're a newer artist or if you are switching to inorganics for the first time. Just expect that it's not going to be as good. Number 2, the strokes are going to heal fairly ashy. This is due to the fact that inorganic pigments, they will fade ashier at first. This is also partly due to the fact that strokes, and particularly microblading strokes, will always heal ashy. And microblading strokes heal ashy because when pigment particles are densely packed together in a microblading stroke, the molecules are so close that the wavelengths of light bouncing between them are shorter, and these reflect a blue or a purple wavelength of light. Counter that with a shaded brow where the pigment particles, they're more spread out, and so the wavelengths of light between them are longer, and this reflects a red or an orange light back to our eyes. Number 3, don't over-modify when working with inorganics because you're going to end up with a salmon or a red brow if you over-modify with orange, or a member of the orange family. So I formulate my pigment cup with 9 drops of target brown and 1 drop of modifier. I don't always modify, but if I do, I am conservative with it. On occasion, I will modify with 2 drops, but only if the skin tone or type really needs it. So what pigment brands contain carbon black? Well, I'm going to tell you, it's probably one of the ones that you're using. If you are using Brow Daddy, Tina Davies I Love Ink Collection, Permablend, Even Flow, or another organic leaning pigment, check the label for CI number 77266 or Black 7. So many artists use these pigments not knowing the long-term consequences. They are popular and they are trusted. What could go wrong? Well, I think what happened is microblading is still so new. In 2017 and 2018, many artists, they switched to the organic leaning pigments, but only now are we seeing the long-term consequences. So if this is happening to you or you're using organic leaning pigments and it hasn't happened yet, it might be worth considering to make the switch to make your touch-up life easier and to do right by our clients. In conclusion, while carbon black offers a bold and intense color, its long-term effects in microblading are less than ideal. The migratory nature of the pigment combined with the potential for strokes to merge and become that eventual gray bad powder brow, it makes it, in my opinion, a less favorable choice for microblading hair strokes. It's crucial for permanent makeup artists, particularly those new in the field, to understand these challenges and also consider alternative pigments that may provide a more stable and natural looking result in the long run. The goal of microblading is to enhance the eyebrow's natural beauty, and achieving this, it requires careful consideration of the pigments that we choose and how they behave in the skin as they age over time. If you like this info, give this video a like and a comment. It tells YouTube that this content is helpful, which will help people like you find this content a little bit easier. If you want to see more helpful microblading videos like this, hug the subscribe button and turn notifications on so you don't miss the next video. Till next time, keep learning.